Welcome to episode 197 of the Campus Comics Cast. I am Scott Reed, and I am joined on this episode by
Mike Atchison.
And Mike, if you were forced to be exposed to some type of comic book radiation or formula, what would it be?
Well, if the famous elixir that Ralph Dibny drank to become Elongated Man, Gingold, came in a radiation form, I would say that. That's what came to mind first. So I know it's not technically radiation, but it's comics, so surely someone can write that story.
Well, for me, it would be Vita Rays, because that's what was Captain America, Steve Rogers, was exposed to.
Oh, yeah.
That partially gave him his abilities. Plus, I don't feel like there's a big downside to the Vita Rays, like you'd get with gamma radiation with the anger issues or
Right.
All the other stuff. So I feel like it was a safer choice. But that's leads us into our main topic for this episode, which is the first 5 appearances of Wonder Man.
Yes.
So I believe we decided to do this because there's a teaser out for the Disney Plus series, so we thought it would be a good chance to dive into this character just a little bit. So do you have any initial comments before we kind of run through our regular first 5 questions, Mike?
Speaking of the TV show, this is one of the Marvel shows that kind of has me interested because it's going to star Yahya, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Abdul Mateen II, who played Black Manta in the Aquaman films. And okay. I think I liked him as a villain. I would like to see him.
He was one of the few highlights in Aquaman as far as I was concerned.
He was, yeah. Yeah, which there were very few, I know.
Yes.
But yeah, that makes me interested in that. And Wonder Man is, hey, that's we try to not just go with when we do these first 5s, not every time do we want to get like an A-list character. We want to get the B and C listers, and I think this is a perfect character to fit that category.
Well, it's characters that, are their origins we may not know a whole lot about.
Yes.
So speaking of your experience with this character, Mike, what was your first introduction to Wonder Man?
Well, I can tell you the first Avengers story I ever read was not Avengers. It was West Coast Avengers. I bought it off the racks in 1984, that 4-issue miniseries. And he was a member of that team. So, yeah, although I don't remember that story, and I should have, if I would have thought of it or had time, I would have maybe breezed through it before because it's still in my collection. But yeah, it was in 1984 in that West Coast Avengers #1, and I must have had the idea that I love the West Coast Titans idea, so West Coast Avengers has to be cool too.
Well, if you ever get rid of that, it's that the 4-issue series, limited series you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you ever decide to get rid of that first issue, I'll take it because it does have Rom, the Space Knight, on the cover.
Oh. You know what? I'm looking at it right now. I didn't even notice that before. Yeah. Was he a member of the team in that story?
No. That was a teaser. It's like because it's got Hawkeye, who's going to be the members, and it's got all the heads around. So they have Rom, the Space Knight's head is there.
Yeah, because I can see like what's his name, the green-haired Hulk buddy.
Doc
Samson, Mockingbird.
Yep.
Wonder Man. Who's the kind of orange? Is it Tigress? The orange skin?
Tigra.
Hercules. Iron Man.
Yep. Who was a member earlier.
Yeah, they're.
But it was the James Rhodes Iron Man.
Yeah, there's. Now I have to go back and read this because I'm I'm interested in some of these characters.
I actually just pulled that book. I had that series up for sale on eBay, and I just pulled it down because I said I need to keep this because it's got Rom on the cover. What am I doing even trying to sell this? So, but my first, I'm at the 90% comfort level saying that my first exposure to Wonder Man as a character was in Avengers 194.
Oh.
So I was buying I had my first comic book ever was Avengers 184. So I was at this point, whenever I could get comic books, I was buying them at Big John's grocery store in El Dorado, Illinois.
Good old Big John.
And yeah, so my first comic off of a spinner rack was Avengers 184. And then anytime I'd have to go back to the grocery store, I would, of course, do the beg and plead to get some comics. I remember I was buying a lot of Marvel Super Action, which were reprints of some of the earlier Avengers, but they also periodically had the current Avengers title on the shelf. So I know I read this early. Is it actually my first exposure to Wonder Man? Maybe not, but it's definitely in the margin of error for it being up there. And this is the thing that I really remember about this issue is it kind of is the establishment of what I'm going to refer to as the bromance between Wonder Man and the Beast.
Oh.
Because they basically they're pals throughout their run together. On Avengers, they go on double dates together and some things like that. So that was really my initial exposure to Wonder Man, Simon Williams.
You said it was 194?
194.
194, okay.
Believe.
I'm looking at the cover right here, and it's got the Vision on it, so... Yeah. Oh, and that looks like a Perez cover even. There is it.
It probably was, because at this point in Avengers, it was all a combination of Perez and John Byrne.
Yeah.
Because 184, I know, had a Perez cover and John Byrne interiors. So, it's a...
There was a time I was trying to collect all the Perez. In fact, you sold me a bunch of the Avengers with George Perez doing any of the art. I haven't really pursued that any further, but oh my gosh, look at it. Avengers 185. That looks like a cool cover with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver.
So we could talk about that run of books there. That's be right in my wheelhouse, because that's where you get High Evolutionary and Wanda and Pietro learning about Magneto being their father and all kinds of cool stuff.
That's important.
Yeah, so that was a good run on Avengers during that time. I think it's all. I don't remember. I know Dave McElhinney was writer at 184.
Yeah.
I don't remember. But even like in some issues around this time period, Gene Colan even did some interiors.
Man,
it might have been in the early 200s that he's on the book, but
very consequential era of Avengers comics. And David McElhinney, I know that name from. He did some early stuff like Sword and Sorcery. He did some, early stuff at DC in the mid '70s. Because he was
also writer when McFarlane was drawing Amazing, and we got Venom as well.
Oh, okay, he became very prolific and did a lot more than what I just ran into him. I just read it was either Claw the Unconquered or something. I got on this big Sword and Sorcery kick of back issues. So anyway, we got off course.
That's okay. Hey, it's all comic book talk, so
Sure.
It's all good.
Right.
So, all right. So, what are your initial thoughts on this first version of Wonder Man that we see?
Well, so it's 1964 when this came out. So it's, you might say it's kind of bland because it's generic power set, but I thought the story made it much more interesting, and the the powers being, I know we'll talk about that here in a second, but the basically casting it as ionic powers, something, Zemo giving him these powers and then blackmailing him, to infiltrate the Avengers. I forgot, how did he come across Simon Williams? Did he just happen to be in South America, or?
Well, no. So they were looking for somebody to go up against the Avengers, and Simon Williams had been arrested. He went bankrupt and was trying to, I can't remember if it was blackmail Tony Stark or whatever. So they basically just take it where he's at his initial hearing, and Enchantress shows up and posts his bail and then drags him to South America.
I think he stole or did something because Tony Stark stole his ideas or something to do with.
Well, his ideas became useless. His patents became valueless once.
Yeah.
Once Tony Stark's patents came into play.
Tony Stark.
So he's just ruining everything, which is kind of funny because much later on, I think in that 194 issue, it's Tony Stark is taking Simon Williams around some of his building sites. So they've reconciled in that amount of time. So.
Well, I mean, the original version, it wasn't a bad costume. It wasn't a bad idea. It was a good story, actually. I thought that story itself in Avengers 9 was a good story. It was, I mean, you've seen that kind of thing happen once in a while where someone that was forced into being a villain for the real villains, which in this case was Baron Zemo
Yes.
and the Enchantress and the Executioner,
Executioner.
which they're as guardians. So,
Yep.
but no, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and but I can also see why maybe it wasn't the character. I mean, maybe they got good feedback and letters saying, "Oh, we like this character," and that's why they decided to bring him back eventually.
Well, we can talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
But I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about this being one of the most generic characters.
Yeah.
What power set wise,
Yeah.
it's just like we really don't get any exposition on his background other than he was a scientific guy, not as good as Tony Stark. He's going to end up in jail, so he gets duped by Zemo to gain these powers. All right, which are just what we'll be talking about shortly. So
Yeah.
it's just like Wonder Man is even a pretty generic name.
Oh, I've
I've
got a thought about that because I did look up because none of this is whole cloth that ever comes out of my brain. I just happened to look online and seen in the Wonder Man wiki or Wikipedia page, I just did a word search for Wonder Woman because I knew there back in my mind I remember there being some sort of court, maybe a lawsuit, and it's sure enough in apparently this came out of Comics Journal number 42 where Stan Lee was interviewed and said, this is in 1978. He says, years ago we brought out Wonder Man and DC Comics sued us because they had Wonder Woman. And I said, okay, I'll discontinue Wonder Man. And all of a sudden they've got Power Girl after Marvel had introduced Power Man. So, oh boy, how unfair. And I thought that was a neat, interesting interview because that's true. And maybe that's why Wonder Man kind of faded away for a while to, sort through the legal stuff.
I didn't realize that Power Man was before Power Girl.
Oh yeah, Power Girl didn't come around until the when All Star Comics was started back up with just started the numbering again or continued the numbering from the Golden Age with like 58 or something, 57. Or 58.
I have her first appearance.
There you go, and that's
and I have Luke Cage's first appearance.
But that was
also.
76, so I don't know when Luke Cage's first appearance was. I thought it was early.
I'll have to check.
Yeah.
I'll have to look and see. I could look it up, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so the third question, Mike, how much do we get about the character's origin in these first 5 issues? And what's been forgotten? What's changed? What's been retconned? What do you want to talk about here?
Well,
there's lots. Actually, I think there's a fair amount to talk about here.
Yeah, I mean his origins. I mean, there was very little detail in issue 9. I mean, you pretty much said it all. He was kind of he was a guy that just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they used him, gave him the powers, and then he was blackmailed to use them. And then in the end, he was kind of a good. It's kind of a typical Marvel story where maybe not just Marvel, but he was a bad guy, but then he had some redeeming act in the end, which that's what happened in issue 9 is he basically sacrificed himself for the Avengers. He kind of showed that he wasn't truly a bad guy.
Right.
But
spoilers, he dies at the end of issue 9.
Yes, spoilers, yeah. Yeah. And to this day, now wait a second. How did he die, Scott? How did he die?
Well, because the ionic energy that Zemo infused him with, he had the antidote, and since he betrayed them, they didn't give him the antidote, so he dies.
Okay, so I couldn't remember if that was the case. I knew that's what Zemo was threatening him with, but I couldn't remember if that's actually how he died. But anyway, yeah, so his origin didn't really evolve because in the issues I read, most of it was flashback. You really didn't learn anything more until it wasn't. So you really can't count it as part of his origin as much as you can someone else's origin. And
several people's origin.
Yeah,
as part of their story.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens, retconning, is that he didn't die and they left him there. Apparently, Hank Pym brings his body back to the Avengers Mansion. And that happens that's like a flashback in Avengers 58.
Right.
Where, again, it's not to save his body, but it was to save his brainwave patterns. And then we find out that was used in the Vision. Whenever Ultron creates the Vision, use Simon Williams' brainwave patterns, which is going to tie into some other characters that happen. So to me, that's kind of like the biggest retcon is the fact that he didn't just die there; he was brought back to New York.
Yeah. It didn't take much retconning to make that happen. I mean, basically, he just you assumed he died, or they were told you he died, but truly his body died, but his brain didn't. So in 58, they transfer his brain patterns into the Vision, or Ultron does, Ultron 5. So you got Hank Pym creates Ultron 5, Ultron 5 creates
the
Vision. I didn't even know all this stuff. I didn't know any of this.
Oh, okay.
I mean, this is really
so that was
this was first time.
It was a nice reminder of like how far this goes back, So this is this whole, and I'll save this. There's other characters that are also kind of involved in all of this history of the Vision as well.
Yeah,
it's really messy if you kind of try to follow the history of the Vision.
But
so
remember, at this point you got Roy Thomas writing, and Roy convolutes the things. I love the guy as a writer, but he gets very flowery and very complicated, unnecessarily so sometimes.
Okay. Well, I thought this was all. I mean, I was like, this is pretty good. I mean, they're digging deep because even from like 9 to like 58. That's 4 or 5 years that they're still.
True, yeah. But again, that's what Roy Thomas did. He loved to mine old material. So.
And that's one of my notes is like, man, they kept going back to the well with this character for a 1-issue character. Okay, so he shows up in issue 9, which was October of 1964. Okay, he's mentioned in Avengers number 11. He's got 1 flashback panel. In Avengers 21, he's got a 4-panel flashback. In Avengers 52, we learned that the Grim Reaper is his brother. So we're still digging into this well of Wonder Man. Avengers 58, that's where all this stuff happens with the Vision. Simon Williams' brainwave patterns. And then in 79, there's another mention. It's only mentioned Wonder Man in a fight between Grim Reaper and the Black Panther. And then this is where the Grim Reaper learns that Simon Williams' brainwave patterns are the brainwave patterns of the Vision, which makes the Grim Reaper think that, oh, my brother is still alive.
Yes.
And that's kind of those first 5 appearances. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, that's 6.
Counting 11 because I didn't know about 11.
Yeah.
That must Yeah.
11 again, it was 1 panel. There's it is a small panel. You just see him in costume and they're just talking about it. So it's like, man, they just kept going back to that one story time after time after time.
Yeah.
And it to me, it's like of all the characters to kind of, go to the well for, Wonder Man was the character they went to the well for like this.
Well, if you're an absolutist, I think that the ones I read, except for 11, because I missed it somehow. If you're an absolutist and count a flashback or a mention or someone who's in another person's body, like was in Visions, counting them all as appearances, then it was Avengers 9, 21, 52, 58, 79, over the course of 6 years, like you said. So.
Yeah, it was quite a while. So.
And it wasn't even until what was that story arc that he actually, the body and soul came back.
So down in Avengers 131, 132, and then Giant Size Avengers number 3, Kang brings back the Legion of the Unliving, and Wonder Man is one of the members, but he's still not alive at this point. It's just, he's dead.
Oh.
He just doesn't know he's dead, I guess.
So we have another qualifier. He's not really back. He's just the living dead.
It's not until Avengers number 151 we get the last 2 pages where there's this giant box on the doorsteps of Avengers Mansion, and Wonder Man busts out of the box, kind of zombie-like, claiming that the Vision stole his mind, and then that's the end of that issue. And then in 152 is really where Wonder Man comes back, and we learn that he was revived by the Black Talon, which is a villain that came out in Strange Tales as an antagonist to Brother Voodoo, who was taking over the Strange Tales from Doctor Strange when Doctor Strange got his own book.
Wow.
So, I mean, and that is a span. Okay, so we go from, again, October 1964 to he's dead until August of 1976.
Wow.
So really, they've got 12 years. And he appears, 10 times before he's actually officially alive, just in flashbacks and as a dead character brought back to life by Kang. And
so in those later issues, in 130, 132, 150, whatever, what costume did he have on? Did he have the original, or did he?
He still had the green.
Okay.
He still had the green and red in all these appearances. Okay. Yes.
Because one of my first exposure to him, or first time I seen him, he had the red glasses blue with the coat that looked like he's a movie director or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you call those things. Not really a trench coat, but yeah.
Well, it was just like a longer jacket, and he had the blue pants, and then the things on the disc on the side for flight, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of the other thing that's changed with the character is before he was, I guess, technically an inventor or a scientist,
mm-hmm.
and now they've moved towards this celebrity wannabe. That's how I remember Simon Williams is as the celebrity wannabe. He's always trying to break into Hollywood.
Oh.
Do whatever. So that was whenever I started reading Wonder Man in whatever, and like I said, of 194. That's what his kind of dream was to be a Hollywood guy.
Yeah. Kind of like Booster Gold, except Booster he liked fame and money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Booster just wanted the attention. Wonder Man wanted to be in.
He wanted to be in the movies.
Pictures. Yes.
I'm gonna make it into big leagues, Mom.
That's right. So look, let's talk about the power set. I think we've pretty much covered it.
Unless it evolved over time. Some in my head made me think, because of those red glasses, I thought he had some sort of special vision powers. But I don't know.
I don't remember any. And, of course, the only thing he shows in these issues are strength, some invincibility, and then the ability to fly through the use of that.
Yeah.
The whatever on his belt.
Yes.
Right. I don't remember any other powers. And I don't guess we ever see his eyes in any of these issues after he gets his power.
No, he had the
goggles on.
And they were red tinted goggles, but they were connected to his cowl.
Yes. So we don't know that apparently he now has this red energy for eyes, which is that ionic energy that he has. So so that's, it's pretty straightforward power set. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but how closely does this version of the character match what we see in comics today? What do you think's the same? What's different? Do you feel like we've covered that? Do you think
I think so, because I just don't have much information on his modern stories. Like I said, the last time I read him was 1984, and that's kind of shameful that I've not read any more modern day Avengers stuff where he was in it even, but I don't know. I'm sure there's been some modifications over time and they've made it somewhat more interesting, but I can't compare it because I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I know he did his first solo story in an issue of Marvel Premiere. For some reason, I want to say Marvel Premiere 50, but I don't know that is actually correct. He's had some solo titles as well.
Yeah.
And I know in the first, he had a Wonder Man one-shot, and then there was a Wonder Man solo title. And in the solo title, for sure, they really lean into the whole Hollywood thing.
Oh, gotcha.
I wasn't buying any of those books because it's not a character that I've had a lot of interest in, which is one of the reasons why I think they're going with Wonder Man for this Disney Plus series. I suspect they're going to lean into the comedy aspect a little bit more. I actually haven't watched the teaser for that yet. I probably should. I haven't done it yet, so shame on me. But I expect they're going to lean more into the comedy aspect of the character. which is why they're picking a character that really a lot of people aren't invested in.
Sure.
You know, when you ask a room of 100 people, you don't expect a single person to say Wonder Man is their favorite character.
Right. Right.
You know, so that's part of the reason why I think they're using Wonder Man, because they can, you know, tell jokes about Hollywood, and maybe Simon Williams is gonna be making a movie and playing one of the Avengers. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. It could be. Now, just by the way, I just looked up Power Man. Luke Cage's first appearance was in 1972, so he predated Power Girl by 4 years.
4 years, okay. Yeah, it's kind of funny too. Is that there was a different Power Man. Actually, there was a Power Man in some of these issues.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you had the Lethal Legion, the guy in the brownish costume. He was also
he got his
Power
powers
Man
the same
before.
way from Zemo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was Power Man before Luke Cage was Power Man. So I guess even if, you know, Power Girl had been even a little bit earlier, they would have had a Power Man in the 60s.
Yeah, right. He wasn't a headliner, this guy, the villain, and he might have been different enough that they wouldn't have contested it. But I could see where they would see Power Man, Luke Cage, and Power Girl being that might be bumping up against the line.
All right. So are there any other moments in these first 5 issues that you want to call any special attention to?
I always have lots of moments. That's my biggest section
okay,
here.
All right.
First, I want to say in issue 9. Some of the costumes are not great, specifically Baron Zemo. I don't know when Baron Zemo got a better costume, but this one is not it. The little hood with the crown on it doesn't do much for me. Power Man, the guy we just talked about, that wasn't great design. I don't know if that was a Don Heck design. Don Heck was a good artist back then, but I don't if it was his design, he wasn't very didn't use much ingenuity,
imagination.
Yeah. And speaking of the art, you know, most of my Don Heck experience was my cringing when I'd see a George Perez cover on Justice League, and then the inside would be Don Heck in the 80s. I'm like, oh. But and then when he later did maybe some Flash stuff. He wasn't a bad artist, but he just didn't like. But here, you could tell he was aping Jack Kirby, as was the standing order at the time of the time, you know.
Yes.
And plus he had I forgot who he had in issue 9 as his inker, but Wally Wood was his inker in 21, and that helped the art quite a bit.
Right.
So, I had forgotten what the 4-letter word Hank Pym was to Janet. Reading in this, it was so just so derogatory and sexist and stuff. So
honestly, it's not a lot different than the relationship between Mr. Fantastic and Sue Storm at the time as well. I mean,
very true.
She was they were, you had the brilliant scientist and the flighty female, and that was a Stan Lee, story trope.
It was the 60s. That was accepted, and I mean, it evolved, but I mean, I can stop there, and there's other. If you have any comments or any, but
keep going.
On 21, issue 21. As soon as I just got through saying Hank Pym was kind of a jerk. Hawkeye beats him that, especially when he's talking to Cap. I wanted to punch Hawkeye in the nose the way if I was Cap and had his power, Hawkeye would have never been on the team. I'd have tossed his butt out. Enchantress's powers. Now, I know she's one of those characters that's both in the DC and the Marvel universes. She's a villain in both of them. Well, kind of an anti-hero now in DC because she's been in Suicide Squad. But she's got magic powers, but they're not very articulate. She doesn't cast a spell to do something specific. She'll say, "Well, my powers slowed Quicksilver down." She doesn't really. You don't really. I don't know. And it was just interesting. And then in 52, this one I was really interested in. I had forgotten that Black Panther for a while had the half mask. And I also forgot that Stan Lee, I think, under concern that there would be a connection made between Black Panther, the comic character, and the Black Panther militant group, he started going by just Panther.
Panther.
Yeah. So much was to be learned in these. if nothing else, it was just a great history lesson.
There was one scene, and you talking about that, and somebody is talking to the Black Panther, and from off panel, so you don't even really know who it is that says this, refers to the Black Panther as Blackie.
Yes, that was like in 58 or 79 or one of the later ones.
Yeah. Okay, and it was just like, oh my.
Yeah. Now, he's probably making a reference to Black Panther, his name, but it's still
his name. Yeah,
certainly
not
wouldn't.
Yeah.
2024 ears or eyes, it's like, whoa.
Whoa, yeah. So all the misogyny and you know, and to be fair, at this time the inclusion of a black superhero was really pretty progressive.
Yeah.
And the inclusion of female superheroes was relatively progressive, and look at how far it's come.
Exactly. Now, speaking of
evidence of progress,
speaking of implicit bias or racism, you got this Jasper. This is in issue 52. Jasper Sitwell is like an agent for an FBI type agency, I guess.
I don't know if it's established here or not, but he's ultimately SHIELD.
Oh, he is? Okay.
All right. Okay.
Well, Black Panther is he's trying to get into the Avengers headquarters, and he finds them, unconscious. And for some reason, Sitwell shows up on the scene. And what does he do when he sees a black man at an apparent crime scene? Oh, he assumes the black man is the one that committed the crime. Yeah, and so that was definitely that was a 60s type reaction. Maybe not just the 60s. I don't know.
Maybe not the 60s, yeah.
That did come to mind with his bow tie and all that stuff. Yeah, and this is the issue where we learned that Grim Reaper is Simon Williams' brother and stuff like that. Okay, so here's another one. This is where you laugh because you're like, this, clearly Atchison doesn't know his Marvel comics like he should. But issue 58, at first my notes said, wait a second, does Hank Pym have red hair or blonde? Because in issue 58 it was red and it was blonde in 79. And then later on I read, oh, this is when Clint Barton became Goliath.
Goliath,
yes.
Yeah. Good catch.
Yeah,
Good
so catch. I caught myself, but I had to bring that up.
Well, since we didn't read all the in-between issues, you don't know that
no, right,
happened.
yeah.
So,
yeah.
So I guess, Clint got tired of being the unpowered hero and decided to get some superpowers.
I gotta say, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was so much better portrayed than in the books, until like later years with, the Matt Fraction stuff.
Run.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is so good.
Yeah.
So
the Black Panther references Wonder Man being killed by the Avengers in issue 79 on page 8. And the editor's note says, yes, reader, that was in issue 52. But no, that's not correct. 52 was a flashback to issue 9.
Okay.
So I'm going to write a letter to Marvel.
Can you correct this?
Yes.
Well, you know what they'll do? They'll send you a no prize.
No prize, yes. I guarantee I'm not the first person to see that. But and then
I would think in the how many years has it been?
Yeah. Well, nobody's left alive that was even part of the book. So
yeah.
And then lastly, on
the past 50 years.
Yeah. My last thoughts were, okay, so you know how Batman always has his rubber masks, and they never, even though he's got the pointy ears, somehow he makes it work. A lot of other characters, maybe you had like Nemesis or some other characters that wear the mask back in the 70s and 80s, and you just took it as comic book science or logic. But what I liked about issue 79 here in the Avengers, on page 9, you had the Vision in disguise with a silicone or a rubber mask, basically, went because Black Panther, T'Challa, was a teacher in his alter ego, and he was captured, so he was going to miss school, so Vision volunteered to go in disguise to tell the school. Well, the teacher that he tells, she's like almost faints because of this, Vision's voice and everything. Yes. And then she says, but it looked like he had a rubber mask on. What's that all about? So I'm like, hey, at least she acknowledges that, man, that doesn't look, that guy's face didn't look right.
He's not fooling anybody.
Right. And then here's the last thing. No, two things. Page
Okay.
18 and 79. I didn't know Vision, one of his powers was that he could inhabit the bodies of others, or in this case, like swap bodies with Power Man. It's
Okay.
so. Is that thing
I
a
okay,
thing?
so I think all he was in was the costume. He wore Power Man's costume
Oh,
and put um oh, I'm trying to remember exactly how it was because he was in Power Man's costume and he just went intangible to get out of the costume and
okay.
reveal
That
himself.
makes sense. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
yeah. So he wasn't actually possessing Power Man. He has the ability to go from intangible all the way up to diamond hard is usually how they
Right.
describe
Right.
his density, you know. And so yeah, so it wasn't actually possession. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't remember him possessing
I
somebody."
know. I know. And then the last page of 79 is where we get okay, and because I've read more Red Tornado and Justice League books than I have Avengers and Vision, but
Hmm.
he Vision is second only to Red Tornado in the self-pitying melodrama.
Yes.
I mean, on a dime, he decides, oh, I'm going to leave the Avengers. Yes, I don't know who I
Hmm.
am. I'm blah blah blah.
And what's you mentioned that is a trope that they use multiple times when I'm looking at some of these later issues. Well, once Scarlet Witch gets captured by a Sentinel later on,
Yeah.
and Pietro does the same thing. He just wants to be alone. And then there's another episode prior to that where the Scarlet Witch, I think it's actually no, it's actually in like at the end of 152, so it's actually after that where they just had finished fighting the Black Talon, and she's like, "Oh, my mistake nearly cost the Avengers a life. I just want to be alone." And she goes walking off into the jungles wherever they are at, and just like, yeah, they do that
It's
constantly through these stories.
but it worked, because
Oh
that's
yeah,
what sold comics, just the way soap operas make people to get them
you know,
caught,
and 7 to 15-year-old me,
Yeah.
would have been like, that's just such high quality drama right
Yeah.
there. I mean, that is, now we kind of laugh at its
I'm telling
silliness,
you,
but
I
also, yeah.
my 12-year-old self learned most of my vocabulary from comic books, and I remember
Mhm.
learning some words like cohorts. I never,
Oh,
and to this day, I think, well, that if I ever decide to use that word, it's because I read Roy Thomas writing a book.
yeah. Well, it's like Homo sapien. I learned that from reading X-Men.
Yeah.
So that helped me in biology class.
I probably was an adult before I realized Homo Magi were not a real branch of the human race. That's
Or Homo
or Homo
superior
superiors. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I liked all like. Okay, so this is something that you may have caught on to as you were reading, and this has a little bit more of a tie to some of the post appearances. So, like in Avengers 102, we learned that the Grim Reaper claimed the body of Wonder Man and basically attempts to talk Vision into returning his brain back to his original body.
Yeah.
He declines, but the Grim Reaper says, "Well, here's a way that you can contact me if you change your mind." And then there's this three-part story: Avengers 131, Avengers 132, and Giant Size Avengers number 3. And this is the closest thing to a next appearance of Wonder Man we get, where Kang brings back the Legion of the Unliving. And one of the members is Wonder Man, so he's bringing back all of these dead individuals. Frankenstein's monster, and another interesting one is the original Human Torch. All
Oh,
right.
really?
Well,
Because
so what's
he
interesting?
wasn't he an android though? Yeah.
Yes, yes, he was. And what's interesting is later on, so you have this issue where you have Wonder Man alongside the original Human Torch, and we later learn that Ultron used the original Human Torch's body as the body for the Vision. So the Vision
Oh
is
yeah.
the original Human Torch with Simon Williams' brain patterns
Oh
on top of
yeah.
it. And that becomes very convoluted. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know what the current status of that is right now because there was a time where the Vision and the original Human Torch were on a team together in West Coast Avengers.
Yeah.
That was when John Byrne had taken over, so that kind of messed with that history of comics.
Yep.
And Byrne can try to explain it. I didn't really actually read those issues, but I just thought it was great at this time. You already have this history forming of Vision, Human Torch, Wonder Man Simon Williams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're getting all that all the way back in Avengers. You know, well, really back in Avengers 58.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of where that all started. But they've been playing with that story for years and years and years. And let's see, in 150, we get another flashback. And then finally, in August of 1976, Wonder Man legitimately returns from the dead, having been raised from the dead by Black Talon. So that is, what, 76 to 64? 12 years.
So body and
12
soul.
years.
Now, Black Talon, that was a villain or a good guy?
So villain of Brother Voodoo. So, and I guess he basically was in the book. Brother Voodoo took over Strange Tales when Doctor Strange got his own title.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, so they actually continued the numbering for Doctor Strange and Strange Tales. I believe started at the same. They continued Strange Tales with Brother Voodoo, and Doctor Strange started its numbering at what would have been that issue number.
Right.
So it was 169 or 170. I think 169 for some reason.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay. I feel like we've talked about all the great moments. So
I think so, yeah.
Favorite moment?
No,
yeah,
that covered
favorites?
it, yeah.
Okay, all right. So I guess the next question is, do you plan to seek out more appearances of this character in the future?
I say yes. But it depends on my attention span. I know one thing for sure I'm going to do is get out that West Coast Avengers #1, see what kind of condition it is, and maybe see if that's something you really want because they're on.
Yep.
But I'm going to read.
I have a copy, so.
Oh, you do have a copy?
Yes, I do have it. I pulled it out of my for sale pile off of eBay.
Oh, okay. That's right. You did say that. No, I'm going to read that again just so I can get a little bit of a comparison. As far as, I don't know if you asked this already, but my favorite of the 5 that I read was 52, issue 52 of the Avengers. And that's where, we kind of get, well, maybe it was, no, not 52, it was 58. It was 58 with
58,
Vision, yeah. That's the one I liked the best. It was like maybe the second appearance of Vision. It was when the Vision was explaining, they were explaining things about his origin or whatever, but yeah. So I'll probably
58 was definitely the best story out of all these. However, the best Wonder Man story, well, really the only one that's truly a Wonder Man story, is Avengers 9.
True.
So which we get the whole origin and everything of the character.
So yeah, we can debate all day about what constitutes an appearance, but we were going with the minimal, definition, and it worked for me.
Well, in fairness, we talked about his first in appearance. As long as he showed up or was mentioned, we talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,
yes,
11, 12, 13 issues.
Yeah.
So we talked about 13 issues in total.
Yeah, so nobody can. So we covered it all.
Yeah, so that's right. So.
Yep.
And for me, I don't really Wonder Man. He's always felt like such a generic character to me. Even when they kind of switched over to the whole interest in Hollywood, it's like, I don't care about him landing movie roles. I want him, I want guys out there fighting and having superhero type stories. So he's never really been a character that's interested me too much. And I don't see that changing, though I will 100% obviously watch the Wonder Man series, and maybe that will, maybe either leading up to that, they'll come out with a new series, or they will, mention some previous story that will make me want to go back and read something Wonder Man. But I've never liked any of his costumes or.
Even
he's not been a very appealing.
Even the one with the jacket and the glasses, I was like, that's kind of strange, but it's interesting. It's a little bit different, but yeah. Hey.
All right. Final thoughts on Wonder Man?
There is no such thing as a bad comic, just good comics and better comics. So yeah, I'll keep reading.
There are
if
a few bad comics out there.
I know.
Yeah, there's a few bad comics out there, but all right. So our second topic for the evening, for the episode, is Minor Arcana. All right, this is from Boom Studios, written and art by one Jeff Lemire, lettered by Steve Wands. Do you have anything you want to add before I kind of run through a synopsis of the issue?
No, you go right ahead.
All right. So I meant to put together a character list. I always like to have a character list for these issues because I think it helps. So let's kind of talk about some of the main characters. So we've got Teresa St. Pierre, right, is our main character. All right, so she is the protagonist of the story, and she is being forced to move back to her hometown to take care of her mother. Now, I don't know that they name the mother. I read this issue twice and flipped through it a third time. Did they give the mother a name that you remember?
Just Mom.
Just Mom? Okay.
No, wait,
right,
surely the woman that comes late at night wanting to get her tarot cards read or whatever, surely she mentioned her name in that.
Vicky.
Yes,
okay,
she
so
says,
it's Vicky.
Yeah, she says it's Vicky, and it was late at night. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. So Vicky's the mother, and then we have Grandpa, who is deceased. Okay, then we have, who knows how many of these characters are actually going to become important. We have an unnamed female character who is apparently a past love interest for Teresa St. Pierre.
Right.
And then, go ahead.
You got Kelly McCabe, who was working in the diner. I don't know if you were mentioning
the
her.
diner.
Yeah.
I hadn't mentioned her yet. She was where I was going to, trying to find that page.
Yep.
And all right, so those are, as far as we know, at least in the first issue, the main characters.
Yeah.
So, all right, so we join Teresa in a dream as she finds herself on the coast, standing outside a hotel, and suddenly realizing that she is not alone. Teresa is then awakened by the bus driver as she has arrived in Limberlost, her hometown. She's definitely not happy about coming home. Standing outside of a psychic parlor, Teresa realizes that she is not yet ready to face her mother, so she walks to a nearby coffee shop. There she is greeted by Kelly McCabe, a former classmate who asks if she has returned home to take care of her mother. Teresa then becomes upset and starts to leave, but not until she apologizes to Kelly for her outburst. Teresa finally heads home to meet her mother, who, Vicky is her name. They have a typical disapproving mother-daughter conversation in which we learn that Teresa is a recovering alcoholic. Teresa decides to head out and ends up at a local bar. Realizing this is a mistake, she walks around town and finds herself outside the home of a former girlfriend who is, at this point, unnamed. Then returning home, Teresa finds her mother asleep on the couch with her wig on the floor, leading us to believe that she is suffering from some form of cancer, though they don't go into a whole lot of details about what her illness is. Heading to her bedroom, she opens her closet and finds an old coat that belonged to her grandfather. This brings back a memory of her and her grandfather sitting on swings talking about getting out of town, how Teresa cannot wait to leave, and how Grandpa thought he was going to leave but never did. Teresa is then disturbed by a knock on the door from one of her mother's clients. After some convincing, Teresa agrees to assist the woman with the reading, but not wanting to disturb her mother, starts the tarot reading herself. As the reading begins, Teresa turns over the Tower card and is pulled back into her dream and once again finds herself on the beach outside of the hotel. Again, realizing she is not alone, she heads inside the hotel. All right, so Mike, what's your first thought here on this story?
Well, first of all, that was a good synopsis for so quickly done.
Oh, well, thank you.
Man. Well, I mean, I think that Lemire is just, he was really good. He's really good in this about drawing the reader in without giving us a whole lot of information. You know, your first questions are, who is this woman, Teresa St. Pierre? You know, what's she dreaming about? You know, there's not a whole lot of answers. Why is she so bitter? And it kind of like unravels, or things are revealed in bits and pieces, which is the way you want it. You don't want it all as to be as a big information narrative dump. Where I'm going to ask you, where do you think Limberlost is located?
That was one of my questions that I had down. It's definitely in Canada.
Yes. Why do we think that?
Canada.
Or Alaska?
Well,
But
I think Canada, because the name St. Pierre,
yeah,
I think is
that's
giveaway
another
for French Canadian.
Right.
All right. Plus the Canadian, especially if you go upper Midwest of Canada, it's going to be very similar to Alaska, and I'm sure farther north inside of Canada, definitely, obviously, someplace along the coast. But a lot of this town Limberlost looks like a lot of small Alaskan towns to me, which then with the St. Pierre name, that's why I lean more towards Canada.
Yeah, I had the same feelings that this is a northern town. And I believe Lemire's Canadian anyway, isn't he?
That I do not know. So it would be great if Shad were here to answer that question.
Shad would know that.
Shad,
yeah.
Shad would probably know that. So,
I bet it's out there on the interweb somewhere. But
that's
But yeah,
he is from Essex County, Ontario, which is located in Canada. So yeah, I would, if I had to bet, I would bet Canada.
It made me think of that old show about the what was that town set in Alaska back in the 90s? It was just a
not
TV
Twin
show.
Peaks, but there was Twin Peaks, and then there was the comedy show.
Oh.
And I cannot remember.
Delete this all out of the conversation. I hate when we do
that.
No,
that's okay. You keep talking, and I'll come back to
Northern Exposure.
That's it.
Yeah.
You got it.
That's what it reminded me of. Yeah. I'm almost expecting to see a moose walking down the street in the middle of town. But yeah, I mean, those were my initial thoughts. That this was, I mean, right off the bat, you could tell that, Lemire's storytelling ability is just really good. You got all these character beats about her alcoholism, her mom's alcoholism, she's not recovering. She's kind of like defying cancer and everything else and continuing to drink,
smoking, still drinking
cigarettes and stuff. And then, how we get through the conversation that Teresa had lost her job and her girlfriend back in the big city, wherever she came from or wherever she was these past years. And there's more to the story about her grandfather as well. And then it begs the question, who was her father? Was the grandfather her father figure? It's just, and then you got the lost love from Limberlost. And I mean, so much characterization in this one issue. Way more than there is plot, because the plot is pretty straightforward so far. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of plot to really draw you in, and that's one of my problems with this book. Is like, okay, it's character driven, but it's like I'm not like I don't know if there wasn't enough to say, ooh, I want to see what happens in the next issue for me. Yeah. Because it was just, and this to me, she's just like this mopey goth girl, Now, I'm sure that the character will have more depth initially, but out of the gate, that's kind of what it was. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell on myself here a little bit. But when we did the solicit for this, and I looked at this cover, I thought it was a guy. So whenever we learned that, I mean, it wasn't until she gets named several pages in that's like, oh, this is a girl. This is not.
Yeah, there's not really any distinctive physical features on the cover.
No,
it's got long hair, but that doesn't mean anything either way.
Doesn't mean anything, So so that was a little bit of a surprise, but I mean, it doesn't impact the story,
right?
One way or another. But that to me is a kind of like a little quibble, though, with a little bit of the art.
Yeah.
Where you're not able to actually recognize recognize the character, something like that. So that was a little bit tough for me.
Right.
I do feel like, and again, I'm going to try to get all the negatives out of the way first, that the storytelling broke down a little bit here and there, and especially on that double-page spread, which is, where she starts the tarot reading with the woman that visits in the evening. Okay, I gotta find it here. Here it is. So you have this 2-page spread, and it's like really on a two-page spread, you're supposed to go all the way across and then, come back. And it's just like, I'm not for sure what order I am supposed to read all of these text boxes in.
Yeah.
And there are some little things that kind of bother me. Like, okay, if you look at the text box in the upper right-hand corner, everything to say, ... how to turn over the card slowly to build anticipation, ... And like, that's supposed to be when you have the ...
You think the next paragraph is going to begin with a ...
it's supposed to start with a
Right.
dot, and there is nothing below this on the page. So it's like, okay, did I read all this in the wrong order? I know the lovers came first card and the tower card came second, but it's like, what's the order of the reading? And I just felt like there were some, and to me that's pretty nitpicky on my part. It was super nitpicky on my part, but I read that page like 3 or 4 times trying to figure out what the order was that it was supposed to be.
It must not have thrown me off too much because it didn't really, and it didn't. I mean, the context, because it said everything to say, how to turn. Because she's kind of like, it's a monologue. It says all in the first person narration. She's talking about.
Yes.
She's saying, I've done this, I've seen that, whatever, and she's saying as you're seeing her reveal the cards to the woman who came in a fit, needing to have her cards read. She's saying to herself as she's doing it, everything to say, how to turn over the cards slowly to build anticipation. She's basically talking about how she learned from watching her mom. Even if she didn't take lessons or learn explicitly, she just learned from being around her mom. And she learned how to use the cards to her advantage and say, if you want to find meaning in something, you will. So yeah, I could kind of follow that, but I get what you're saying because it doesn't follow the tradition of end with the ellipsis and begin with the ellipsis. Yeah.
So I mean, to me, you see this all the time in especially in older comics where they literally draw arrows.
Yeah, right.
In the right direction. Right, You've seen that whenever they know that the page.
Or if you're Carmine
is
Infantino,
so
you got like
a
hand and a finger.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, I feel like a little bit of a breakdown. In design, because there's just so much dead space on that that 2-page spread. It's just like, but I mean, again, that's a pretty minor quibble. On my part. Well, it's pretty super minor.
Yeah, still, it's worth saying. I'll say it before and I'll say it again. Lemire's art is the nicest ugly art I've ever seen. It gets better every time I look at it, but it's like initially you're like, oh, it's kind of like, you see other creators, they have this non-traditional art style, but I think his storytelling ability is capital. It's just fantastic.
Well, I'll use this joke again, but to this day, I have never seen Jeff Lemire and Matt Kent in the same room.
Isn't that
together.
the truth? I almost mentioned Matt Kent's name. I almost used him as another example of that because they have that very similar style.
And they're both excellent storytellers, and they're both excellent artists. And now that being said, this is not an art style that I would want to see on Captain America, but this is 100% great for Minor Arcana.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's perfect for Minor Arcana.
Well, Lemire is writing Justice Society of America right now, or the new JSA book, so obviously you wouldn't want to see him draw JSA. I don't think. I wouldn't. Now, you mentioned earlier that you didn't think the ending scene was a hook. I totally am the opposite on that. I think this reminds me of a Stephen King book.
Okay.
Where, she's kind of like falls into a trance as she's doing the card reading. She pulls the tower. Maybe that's why I thought of Stephen King with the Dark Tower. But she goes into the vision of this Hotel Edgewater, and it draws her into the front doors. And the card that's floating down from there is death. So there seems to be an indication of danger where she's going. But I thought that was a pretty darn good encouragement to see what happens next.
I felt like there needed to be a little something more to that, because in my opinion this could almost just be a one-issue little anthology short story, because she starts at the house, the hotel, she ends at the hotel. So that made it feel like, oh, I got the whole story, what else do I need to read? That was the thing. She's eternally entering this hotel. Okay, done, put it away.
Or it could be one of those stories where he goes months without doing the second issue. I mean, it could be like, all these little mini series that go, like The Wrong Earth. It's not one big series. It's just a series of mini series.
There you go. Yeah.
Something about this story reminds me of so I'm going to spell this first because I don't want the explicit thing. Have you heard of the TV show that SCHITTS Creek?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I've not seen it, but I've heard it.
It reminds me in a way because it's a comedy, but this is not.
Mm-hmm.
But
No.
because what's similar is that you've got a family going back to a town. It's not that they even really lived there before. It's just they happen to own the town. That's the whole premise there. They are rich people that lost their fortune, so the only thing they had left was this little podunk town that they own.
Okay.
So, and it's full of all the podunk town people, and something about this reminds me that it's dark. Uh, but yeah, otherwise,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I want to know what this reminded me of.
What?
Gideon Falls,
That
believe it or not.
yes, that's the one with the barn, right?
That's
Yes.
so in Gideon Farms, excuse me, we have this barn that appears and disappears.
Yeah.
And here in Minor Arcana, we have this hotel
Yes.
that in a way appears and disappears.
Yep.
So now this does not feel as dark or maybe evil as the barn.
Not as overtly, but yeah.
Yes,
right.
not as overtly dark or evil, but could it be? Yeah, or could it not be? Yeah, but it has a very similar feel to me than from what I got from Gideon Falls. You have this troubled individual who's seeing this building.
Yeah.
In Minor Arcana, you have a troubled individual, probably not as troubled as the main character in Gideon Falls,
Yeah.
but also seeing this
Yeah.
building repeatedly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I like there's a couple parts that on the characterization. Again, it was just the little bit where Jean, the woman that came, wanted to have the cards read because she had it was something about her deceased husband who happened to also be
Right.
named Gene but spelled Gene. So Gene and Gene, I thought that was kind of funny. And then yeah.
I was just going to say, in the last season of Umbrella Academy, and I don't know if this was actually pulled from the comics or not, because I wasn't really into the Umbrella Academy comics, and not really into the series. I just kind of watched it because it was the last season I was going to watch it.
Yeah.
But they also had two characters, Gene and Gene.
Oh, did they?
Yes. So yeah, that's something that's been done before. But okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. My last thought on the story was that I thought, I guess you could expect it, but as curmudgeonly as she was, Teresa that is, and bitter, it was nice seeing her when she came home and her mom's basically passed out, wigless on the couch. She still had a little softening, and she covered her up, and that ended the issue or was toward the end of the issue. So
Yes.
it was nice to see, okay, she's got that redeeming quality. She's not just always the bitter, angry goth girl. She's, she does love her mom, even though her mom drives her crazy.
So for me, if there's one thing that is going to potentially bring me back to this story, was actually after the last page. You turn the next page, and what do we have? We have this ad for the entire Minor Arcana series, a long-form series from the creator of Sweet Tooth to be collected in 4 deluxe hardcovers.
Oh.
And we see that, so Lemire clearly has a plan, because book 1 is the Book of Wands. And if you look at the front cover in the upper right-hand corner, you have these 4 icons. You got the wand, you've got I guess it's all the whatever they are. I lost my page. The swords, the cups, and the pentacles. And those icons are there in the upper right-hand corner. And the Book of Wands is slightly colored yellow here on the cover. All right. And then you see, this is probably going to be cover images or spine images at least for these 4 volumes. So you have Teresa on the Book of Wands.
Mm-hmm.
You have, was it Vicky, the mother,
Yeah.
on book 3. I believe that's Grandpa.
That's Grandpa on book 4.
And then a so far unknown character on the cover of book 2.
Yeah.
So Grandpa is at least going to continue to appear in flashbacks, if not in a more meaningful event. And apparently Vicky's going to be around for at least a little while in this story. So we're looking at somewhere between, I'm going to say, 16 and 24 issues for this series, depending on if they're 4-issue volumes or 6-issue volumes.
Well, it's clear that Boom Studios is all in on it. They're counting on Lemire's star power.
Yep.
Rightfully so, I think. So, Yeah, you're right. That is. I didn't even look at that honestly. After I don't usually look at the ads, the house ads in the back,
Oh yeah.
and I can tell you why
Well, I've
because
like.
one of them is for the Power Rangers, so that's why I don't
Oh
look at
yeah.
them.
Well, but there was also for the Berserker Lost Book of B, which is co-written
Yeah,
by Matt Kent.
that's
Turn
right.
over another
That's
page
right.
there, so hey, so you got that at
Yeah,
least. But yeah, you're right. I skipped over the Power Rangers.
but I'm glad you caught that because I totally missed it. That's
Yeah.
interesting because it does make me more apt to whether it be digital or get the collected editions.
Hmm.
I'm more likely to read these.
Yeah. So all right, I have a feeling my grade is going to be lower than your grade, so I'm going to go first.
Hmm.
So I am going with a very good fine 5.0 because it did not do enough for me at this point to want to keep reading the series. And for me, you know, things that I want to continue to read are at least a 6.0.
Yeah.
So I was like, so that means I got to put this down here
Yeah.
like at a 5.
Okay.
You know, so I guess if I hear that it really, really turns a corner, then I would 100% be willing to come back to this book at some point in the future. But for now, I got enough to read. I don't need to add this to my to read pile. So yeah, so I'm gonna stick with a 5.0. Very good find for my rating for this issue.
Well, if you're factoring, I've got a lot of other stuff to read before this. Yeah, I could probably lower my grade as well. But I'm going to try to be just completely based on one single issue. It's
Mm-hmm.
got a lot. There's a lot to be desired as far as this. It's not a complete story, so you're basing it on
Mm-hmm.
just the hook first issue or just the first introductory thing. So, and if I read it just once, I'd probably give it a little bit lower, but I'm giving it an 8.5, very fine plus.
Oh,
So
okay.
that is, yeah, it's quite a bit higher, but it's just I think it's the storytelling. I and sometimes I need a break from a superhero story, and
No,
I
I
like,
get that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and
But I'm kind of thinking back to like, okay, when I read the first issue of Die, or when I read the first issue of Once and Future, I'm nowhere near as excited about this book as I was those after
wow,
the first issue.
wow, okay,
And I mean, but now both of those series
kind of petered out, yeah, yeah,
declined, for me. So maybe I should, you know, just because it wasn't that awe-inspiring first issue,
right.
that's why I am willing to come back to it if I hear it's really, really good. So if you say it's awesome, if
I'll
Shad says it's awesome, somebody else at a convention says
I'll
it's
take one
awesome,
for the team, and
okay, I'll come back to it. But for now, I'm just gonna let it slide.
okay. I don't know if it's on Comixology yet, at least like because I know it's the first two issues are out. Maybe the three's been is close to being out, but it's not very far into the run. That's why I was surprised to see that house ad talking about 4 volumes.
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that there is a clear plan for this
Oh
story
yeah,
moving forward.
yeah,
So we know we have a defined start and end,
yeah.
and
Which is yeah,
even we're just a few issues in.
right.
So, all right, final comments on Minor Arcana.
No, I think it was I mean, it was a good one to review. There's some that I'd be. Yeah.
Anything you wanna add before we do a CLZ shake and wrap this episode up?
No, I'm ready for the CLZ. I think, Scott.
Okay, so I'll go ahead. I got my phone out already, so I'll shake here and hope I get.
Ooh, it's
Oh, I got a winner
I can
here.
see Fantastic Four on it, but that's all.
Fantastic Four issue number 52.
Oh, that's not a
So
facsimile, is it?
that is not
Oh,
a
look at you
facsimile.
go.
That's a CGC 7.5 FF number 52, first appearance of the Black Panther,
Yeah.
which is funny since we spent a little bit
Yeah,
of time
we did.
talking about
Yeah.
the Black Panther in our Wonder Man first 5. So yeah, it's pretty obvious as to why this particular issue is in my collection, being the first appearance of the Black Panther. I am, I've read it. It's in this issue. It's actually a 2-part story. You got 52 and 53. So in issue 52, they're the Black Panther is demonstrating his superiority to the Fantastic Four. He's able to capture all 4 members of the Fantastic Four. And in fact, in 53, it's Wyatt Wingfoot who's actually able to free the Fantastic Four so that they can then fight back against the Black Panther. So this was written by Stan Lee, penciled by Jack Kirby, part of their 100 issue run on Fantastic Four, and it's really this is the time period where it's probably the pinnacle of the Lee Kirby time together on any book, because you had the Galactus trilogy right before this, and This Man, This Monster, and all the Inhumans. All this stuff is happening here during this run of Fantastic Four around that time.
Yeah, I don't know which.
That was a good shake. I'm glad to have that one.
Yeah, that's a good one to have. All I have is the facsimile.
Yeah.
And
I actually right now I have 2 copies of this book.
And I wanted to say that we reviewed this on Campus Comics, but that's not true. I reviewed it on the Road Show with Andy Leyland from the UK just on the last episode. I believe it was number 22. So if you want to hear more about this particular issue, go to Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow and listen to episode 22.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you got for a shake,
All right,
Mike?
let's shake. My camera.
Too much glare. Yeah.
Well, I've got a quite early issue of The Brave and the Bold. It's the first team up of Aquaman and Hawkman, which you wouldn't think they're 2 characters that would have much environment that they would work to. You can't get Hawkman can't swim underwater, and Hawkman can't fly. Or Hawkman can't swim, and Aquaman can't fly. But this is from 1964. About the same time as the Avengers number 9 that we were talking about. And this is pre-Brave and the Bold with Batman as the lead, but post-Brave and the Bold as a tryout. So the first iteration of the first couple 10 or 20 issues was mostly tryouts, kind of like showcase, and then it got into these team-ups with various characters, and this was one of them. And then eventually, by issues, and I forgot to mention, this is Brave and the Bold issue 51. By issue, say 70-something, it was basically all Batman and another character teaming up. So, it's one of the titles that I've tried to be as much of a completist as I can be on, but
that you can afford
that
to
I
be
can
on.
afford to be, yeah. But it would be easier than it would be, say, Showcase, because Showcase 4 is the deal breaker there. So yeah, I'm glad I got it. I don't doubt that I've read it even. It was more of a collector's deal. Yep.
Okay, so since Shaz's not with us this evening on episode 198, we should be back to the December pre-orders episode. And then, of course, you can reach out to Mike and I and Shad at podcast@bergcomics.com. Mike, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, where would they do that at?
Well, it'd be, other than the general catch-all email address you just gave, you could get me on Blue Sky, Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow. You can also get me on the Campus Comics Facebook page. If you just want to type in a couple comments and not write a full email, hey, feel free to hit us up on the Campus Comics Facebook page. I'm not really going to follow I still have my Twitter/X account, but I'm kind of going more over to Blue Sky because it's less political and more comics.
And I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at bergcomics.com, BURG comics.com, where you can find links to my social media pages and eBay store. And we'll be back soon with episode 198.
Wait. I knew there was something else. Let me see how they pronounced it here. Oh, yeah, the Jingled or Ginkgo biloba. Yeah. Okay, it's with the hard G, Jingled. Believe it or not, it was on YouTube. According to who? Oh, really? But are they right? Well, it's the internet. The internet's always right. I'm going to say Jingled. Jingled sounds like, because I've got, if this was a YouTube episode, I would show you what Tyler got me that time. My little flask. Jingled. Good old Tyler. Telling him to have something unique.